Welcome to the Veterans in Politics Talk Show. Join us every Wednesday night at 6 p.m. Pacific Time, live stream on Facebook.
Welcome to the joint veterans endorsement interviews for non-judicial candidates. On the outset, I'd like to formally recognize and thank our sponsoring organizations for making today's event possible. Mary Perry, Clark County District Court Family Division, Department P, Veterans in Politics International, and Nevada Veterans Association. I'd also like to extend our sincere appreciation to our additional sponsors and community partners whose support helps ensure a professional and fair and transparent endorsement process. We're honored to have all of you with us today. Before we begin, I'd like to just go over the rules and the format. First, each panel member will introduce themselves by stating their name and the organization that they represent. Next, you'll be given an opportunity to introduce yourself and talk about the office that you're running for and explain why you seek an office. Then we'll proceed to the interview portion. Since you're only a candidate, there's no need to remind that this is not debate and you can't talk to yourself. But but when you do get asked questions, please address the entire panel. To keep things facilitated in the interest of time, you'll be given 1 minute and 30 seconds to answer each question. When we've reached the 30 seconds, you will be shown a yellow card. When the time is expired, you'll be shown a blue card. Once you see that blue card, you can finish your final sentence and please conclude your statements. We can move on to the next question. Afterwards, you'll be given an opportunity for a closing remark. So with that said, I'll start with Mr. Fortune and end with his introduction.
Good afternoon. I'm Stephen Fortune with Veterans in Politics.
My name is John Brookhagen, representing Veterans in Politics.
Tim Ross, representing Nevada Veterans Association.
Martin Walker, representing Nevada Veterans Association.
Frank Friends, Veterans in Politics and Family Court Observer.
Okay, my name. Whoops. Second.
You're good. Just talk.
Test. My name is Al Rojas. I'm running for State Senate 21. I've lived in here in Nevada for 8 years. Prior to that, I lived in Orange County, Newport Beach for 38 years. And I was raised in Los Angeles. I left Los Angeles in 1970 and right out of high school. I've been involved in the community. My two biggest issues are education and public safety. I've been involved in cleaning up 50 encampments, 50 RVs, shut down about 10 late night parties, which usually turn into unruly reckless driving, DUIs, and things of that sort. So I'm very engaged with community safety. I started a neighborhood watch group called Safe Communities Network, and my district goes all the way down to Eastern between Charleston and Desert Inn, and it goes all the way up to Lake Las Vegas. So I covered 3 districts. I covered Henderson, unincorporated Clark County, and the city of Las Vegas. And pretty much we've been very, very successful. I'm well known on social media, and public safety is where it's at. I believe in closing that public safety and education are the foundation of prosperity.
Good afternoon, Mr. Rojas. I see you're a huge stickler for crime, and making penalties for these crimes. With the increased penalties, the proposals, there's proposals in here to include redefining habitual criminal. And what's mean is to include those with only 2 previous felonies down from 5, before it was 5, and creating stricter penalties for crimes committed while out on bail. What are your thoughts and opinions on that matter? So,
well, if you got repeat criminals out there, we got to be harsher on them. We can't be having people coming out on the street. Now, if we need a little bit more jails, that's a possibility. To get these people in jail. But we also believe in some rehabilitation. We know that education reduces recidivism. We know that. And there are some education programs, some programs out there one of them, I forget the name but there's a few of them out there that Metro is involved with. But we want to get these people some therapy maybe when they get in there, but we don't want to have repeat criminals out on the street like we had the event with Sheriff Kevin McMahill, where he had that one guy, 35, been arrested, and then he was on the street again. So we need to do something about that.
John Brookhagen, representing Veterans in Politics. And first of all, I want to thank you very much for coming down here. It's really disappointing that Junior Romero or your probable opponent, James Orenshall, are not here. With that said, you've run multiple times. This is actually going to be your first time getting out of the primary because you're running unopposed and the primary was canceled. You've had trouble raising money in the past, and you're going to be going up against an incumbent who's been in office for a while. So first of all, what's going to be different about your candidacy this time around? Do you have any more ideas regarding fundraising? And what is it about James Orenshall in specific that makes you motivated to run against him in order to get a change in this particular district?
Okay, those are very good questions. We're in a district that's got a lot of Democrats, okay? And the previous person that ran for this was Miss Larson, Fleming Larson's. They spent over $100,000, and they didn't outperform the candidate who didn't do anything in 8014. My district is part of 8012 and 8014. This is going to take a little long to answer. So when you look at their performance numbers, money can't buy you love, man. I'm telling you that. You can spend a lot, against Larson, I have a lot of respect. I'm actually endorsed by him, but Mark Robertson ran against him, and we beat them. Okay? So it takes community engagement. The people have to know you. That's why I got involved through Neighborhood Watch and social media. So what's going to be different is the people know me. I got a proven track record. I've got name recognition. Money can't buy you that. Okay, so when you look at my track record against Romero and against Orenshall, they have done nothing for the community. Encampments are all over the place. RVs are all over the place. Shoplifting is all over the place. Orenshall wanted to have people staying on the sidewalk. That is going to be one of my campaign peeves against him.
I mean, Orenshall as an incumbent is automatically going to have more name recognition than you. So what are you going to do in order to overcome that? And what is it specifically that he's done that you oppose?
One of the things that I've done that he's opposed is keeping people on, like I just said, he wanted to have an ordinance to people staying on the sidewalk as long as they had an encampment to cover them from the shelters. What's up with that? And that's the biggest problem that we have. The other thing, people don't know who Orenshall is. The only reason they vote for him is because he's always run unopposed.
Thank you.
Tim Ross, Nevada Veterans Association. What bills would you like to see passed or changed that can help Nevada veterans? This is a veterans organization. What can you foresee to help?
I like to see, there's a lot of veterans on the street and the homeless issue. I'd like to see some services that actually address the issues with the homeless, whether it's drugs, whether it's housing, things of that sort. There is one development that's going to be going over in Sunrise Manor in our area, which is going to reach out to veterans that are on the streets and at least get them housing. Okay. We want to the thing is, a lot of these services, like in California, they spent $32 billion on the homeless problem, and it's getting worse. We want to see how many people they're detoxing, how many people they're getting off the streets, how many people they're getting into jobs, identifying the problems, especially for veterans out there. So we want to get more housing. We want to get more research on why the veterans are out there. And then we also want to there's a new program called the Community Land Trust, where the county owns the land, but the citizens own the property. And that's a good way to get into low cost housing. But there's even veterans that don't even qualify for that yet.
Follow up. Earlier, someone said that there's a lot of a lot of services for veterans, but they're not being guided to that, and they need more guidance to access the services. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. That's true with all the services. We definitely need to see more, transparency. That's the issue. And these services, I would love the veterans to reach out to me and say, we want something stronger on these services. They're not doing their job. Absolutely.
Frank Friends, Veterans of Politics and Court Observer. So you actually are over a pretty sizable district area here in Nevada. And we're seeing that California is getting rid of Glock. They're trying to get Glock out of there and sue them and things like that.
They're trying to get what out of them?
Glock, the manufacturer Glock firearms. They're trying to get them out of there, and just taxing them to all hell. You have areas in which you could have factories up in there to support people, get veterans working and things like that. Would you be willing to try and negotiate with Glock to bring a factory over there, get some production going, get some textiling going, building the weapons, assembling them, having classes, and maybe having veterans on that assembly line since they already know how to work with firearms in a safe manner?
Absolutely. One of the things with getting people employment is you want to leverage their existing knowledge. And if they've got a skill set, I absolutely would love to hear what veterans have to say about that and put a bill together if that's what you guys want. I'm definitely, as a senator, I have a lot of bills, even as a freshman, that I can put on the table over there, put over at Carson City. So I definitely want to do that. I also want to do something for very quickly. I hope I have enough time. I'm a retired electronics engineer. I lived in Irvine, Newport 38 years prior to being here. I've been here 8 years. But I grew up in East Los Angeles, next to Hollenbeck. You may ask me, hey, how did you from Hollenbeck end up in Newport Beach and you were 18, 19 years old? How did that happen? You know how that happened? Field trips. People, when I was a kid, I wanted to be an engineer. I went to a lot of field trips to Hughes Aircraft, to Bechtel, to all these high-tech industries. So I had good long-term goals. We need to do not only for our veterans, but we also need to do for our young kids field trips to jobs that are out there, even blue-collar jobs like plumbing, like my air conditioning, like trucking. These are all like law enforcement. Okay, our problem with our kids is they don't have any long-term goals. They don't see what's at the end of the tunnel after high school.
That's a good segue from one of my questions here. So during the last interim session, AB 4 passed and went into effect on January 1st. It was significantly increased penalties for various offenses, and certain crimes and theft, including or involving property damage. So many community organizers argue that the bill was heavy on penalties and incarceration and very low on any help with the circumstances that could have prevented a person from committing the crime in the first place, whether through mentoring programs, through other non-profit organizations or whatever. There was no funding really put into that other than some mental health evaluations for youth. What would you say so what would be a bill you could look at if any future legislation was introduced about public safety that was very heavy on incarceration and offered nothing for crime prevention measures along with it?
Okay. Well, that's a very good point. And so, like I said, education and public safety are the foundation of prosperity. Many of these kids that are usually a career criminal will start his career as a criminal as a teenager, okay? And they usually don't get out of the justice system until they're 37 years old. You can verify that with a lot of the judges that you guys are talking about. We want to start reaching out to kids, like I said, with field trips, okay, to get our kids. That's going to definitely reduce crimes where a kid has a long-term goal. Now, you don't have to go to college to be successful. I know a lot of people without a college education that are very, very successful, okay? So the thing is that we want to focus on careers and blue-collar jobs as well. Like I said, plumbing. I know a guy who's a plumber who's very, very successful. He's running a whole church now, okay? He's actually my pastor. People in air conditioning, trucking, law enforcement, nursing, fire departments. these are jobs these are the high paying jobs here in Clark County. It's not like where I lived in Irvine where there were, high tech engineers. And as we start, that is one way to slow down crime. And once they get incarcerated, maybe hold them for a year or two so they can get some kind of training for recidivism, and also have field trips and see what jobs are out there for them.
So, as a follow up, just to be clear, is it your assertion that employment goals is the solution to crime prevention, or what about other services that could help dissuade a person, or give them alternatives to criminal activity?
Generally speaking, employment, I think, is. I mean, when you have a job, I think you're committed to a long-term, to stay in that job and not commit crimes, okay? But there's a lot of reasons why people commit crimes. Sometimes it's drugs. We got to lower drugs on the street. Some of these guys get into drugs and all they want to do is just steal for their drug habits. So there's a lot of reasons why crime is caused. Jobs is, I think, a major component. But getting drugs off the street, getting people educated so they have options in life, I think education definitely opens the doors to many of criminal problems.
Yes, sir. Touch a little bit here on the homelessness issue and with the trouble of some of the residents here in Clark County to pay their rents or pay their mortgages. Out of desperation, a lot of times they're living paycheck to paycheck. Out of desperation, they'll reach out to a lot of these lenders for the payday loans. And Nevada does not have a cap on the payday, or it does not have a cap on the interest rates with the payday loans. And while there are regulations on loan terms and fees, the state does not restrict the annual percentage rate, allowing lenders to charge rates often exceeding 500%. That and the people become in a bind, and basically they're left out in the cold. They can't make the payments at all. Attempts to institute a 36% cap in the 2024 ballot failed in the courts due to challenges and lawsuits. What can we do in order to try to get a cap put on that?
I would definitely support a cap on interest rates if that was really proven that it's causing a lot of people to get into homeless issues. For example, one of the things is that I hear that some people, a certain percentage of the homeless people are people that came from out of state, lost all their money gambling, and then they get stuck. Identifying them through these services that you guys were talking about with the veteran. We need to do more research on why these people are having problems. Getting a ticket, giving them a ticket home, that might be the best thing than having them around here for years just loitering and, us picking up after them. So definitely I would look into that. I want to find out why it wasn't passed. But if that is a major issue that's causing homelessness, there's a lot of reasons. One of them is we've got a lot of out-of-state investors. 25% of the homes in North Las Vegas are owned by out-of-state by hedge funds. So we have a lot of factors that are contributing to the homeless and the crime problems. We got to start addressing those issues, and that may be a strong component that I will strongly look at.
John Brookhagen, representing Veterans in Politics. The Department of Education and local school boards ultimately answer to the legislature, so there's a role for state oversight. At the same time, many parents feel that schools have moved away from a focus on core academics, reading, writing, and arithmetic, and towards more socially or politically driven content, while practical subjects like financial literacy are often underemphasized. There's also concerns about how major historical topics are presented, whether it's the full context of slavery and how it ended, the realities of colonization, and broader narratives about American history, and whether students are getting a balanced, fact-based understanding rather than a one-sided perspective. So what role should the legislature play in ensuring curriculum prioritizes core academics and practical life skills, and how would you ensure that subjects like history are taught in a way that is more accurate, complete, and balanced than selective or ideological?
Well, definitely we want to focus on the fundamentals of reading, writing, and arithmetic. Those are the basics that every kid should know. I talked to a couple of the legislators. One of the things that I wanted was to have earmark funding where they say this money goes here. when they did some funding for the one of the schools sections. Okay. And what happened was I told her, hey, that's great that you guys earmarked that funding. He goes, we didn't earmark that funding for those schools. We recommended it. So I'm not really sure how strong maybe the legislature, if they can have where they emphasize on the curriculum, what is being taught by the schools. But the school district, this like CCSD, they have a lot of leeway on what's going on. So there's a lot of holes. People are not all lined up. What we need to do is do a forensic study of where the money is being spent and getting more money spent. That's one of the things that has to be done. But we need to change the laws so that the legislator can tell these people exactly how to spend the money.
The school board acts, and their job is turn less into decision making and more into implementation of legislation. And the problem is sometimes these topics, like I said, whether it's slavery or certain things, are represented in a way that's not very true and frankly unpatriotic. So, don't you think the legislature has a duty to instill patriotism and fact-based history?
Absolutely. We know, like I'm minority, as you can tell, and I learned about the Constitution from a young age. I invested in America. I knew that finding what you like to do and being a person of integrity and aligning yourself with people of integrity was the formula for success in America. And it worked for me. And I grew up on the east side of Los Angeles. Okay, so absolutely sticking to core, what our Constitution stands for, the pursuit of happiness. All of these fundamentals that we were told about, we definitely got to go stay there.
You will.
Tim Ross, representing Nevada Veterans Association. My question is: during the last session, there was a bill proposed about transparency, more like the open meetings laws that the counties have to apply to. But it was not voted on because, the person that presented it was not in the majority party. So two questions here, two parts. First of all, do you believe in the transparency in passing these bills? And second, what skills do you have to get across the lines and get these messages across that even if you're not in the majority party, that you can get them to cooperate and vote on bills like that?
I'm going to say something here that's totally going to blow everybody away, especially if you're Republican. There's in a Senate district that I'm cleaning, that I've done a lot of cleanups, which is Senate District 2, which is Edgar Flores is the president incumbent. There's a new guy running there, Isaac Barone. He's also a Democrat. He was on the city council for 12 years. I'm supporting Isaac Barone. Isaac Barone would be better for the community. He knows community issues. Okay, I'm not sure what Edgar Flores is doing. Maybe he's positioning himself to go to Washington, D.C. We need somebody I've done a lot of cleanups on that. And that's not even my Senate district. I wanted to show to the people that I could get the job done. I wanted to build a track record. Okay, so I have no problems working with Democrats, and I have no problems even having some of them present my bill. If it's for the community, if it's for reducing crime, for reducing safety, for reducing recidivism, which is what this gentleman was talking about. So I have no problems working with Democrats, and I'm working with them at the moment.
That answers the second part. You do believe in transparency and want to have a more transparent assembly or in Senate.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, I've been going to a lot of you've seen me at the Clark County commissioners meetings. We've been there both together. And, those open law, if it weren't for those open laws, I would have no voice. I would have no channel to talk to the commissioners.
Frank Friends, Veterans in Politics and Family Court Observer. So currently in the state of Nevada, we are allowed to have abortions up to 6 months. And they're now trying to pass a bill that will allow it to 9 months. Where do you stand on this bill?
I do not support that. I'm pro-life, with a few exceptions. Number one, rape. If the mom is going to die, if someone's going to die. So I would not support a bill like that. I would, as a matter of fact, and I think April Becker at one time told me that I could quote her on that. She said that we have the most liberal abortion laws in the country, or something along those lines. If I get that right, April, you can correct me. But I stand with her. That, I think that this is crazy, All
right. So one of the hottest topics today is immigration policy. Most want an easier process for those to come here through legally documented processes, and others and support humane law enforcement operations for those who don't. As veterans, we respect the rule of law. What are your thoughts on any type of legislation? Because there is chatter by some people who would like to have legislation at the local and state level that would prevent Nevada law enforcement from communicating or cooperating with federal law enforcement. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think things should be humane. I think that we definitely should be going after the people that are committing high crimes. If you're committing a major crime, like child abuse, or you're going out there, killing people, things of that sort, you definitely want to get those people out of the country. I don't support people going into schools, and things of that sort. So I think if it's a high crime, a person committing very, very serious crimes, there definitely should be some cooperation, to that extent. I think there should be some communication, but we shouldn't be having the police. First of all, you can't get the police to even come when there's a fight on the street, when you're fighting with somebody. How are we going to have? They don't have the resources to go out there and start, being doing ISIS job. That's their job.
I'm a big proponent for disabilities benefits for veterans, especially disabled veterans.
Absolutely.
Which come back from their tours, which they've done for our country, sacrificed their blood, sweat, and tears for our country.
Absolutely.
And myself being injured, I was able to experience it firsthand on what these individuals go through on a daily basis because of the injury sustained. What I sustained back in 2019. I was looking at, there was for disabled veterans, 60 to 79% disabled, they get $17,200 exemption. 80 to 99%, they get $25,800 or $25,800 exemption. And then 100% here in Nevada, disabled, they get $34,400. So they do have benefits that come to them. However, so still lagging behind some states, such as Texas, which if you come back and you're 100% disabled, they will what they do is they receive property tax exemption in that state there, and if, of course, rating out at 100% in unemployability in that state as well. And I was saying what Nevada can do itself to kind of be up there and kind of be in that same level here, especially for our veterans and who have sacrificed and gave their all for the country itself.
Well, I guess you're asking me if I basically would want more benefits for absolutely, and I will, I'd like to sit down with the veterans and hear their issues and put a bill together. Maybe we put a big, huge bill like Lombardo did when he had his crime bill. You know what I'm saying? But for sure, what really bothers me is that I've done 50 encampment cleanups, 50 RV cleanups. And I've talked to a lot of these organizations that are doing outreach, okay? And they haven't sat down with me and talked to me about, hey, this is what's really going on. Bring this person over here. I'm still having problems getting people to their services that they need after we remove them from private properties and from areas that they're doing encampments. So one of the things is I definitely want to sit out with veterans. And what bothers me really is hearing that veterans are out on the street. That shouldn't be happening. There's no excuse. And where are all these outreach services? Why haven't reached out to me? And when you see somebody, give us a call first. That's not happening. I would definitely want to find out what these services are and how we can get these services to our veterans.
John Brookhagen, representing Veterans in Politics. In 2025, Nevada again considered legalizing medical aid in dying through AB 346. And this issue continues to come up year after year. Supporters often frame it as a personal liberty issue for individuals facing severe suffering, but opponents raise concerns about long-term consequences. particularly in other jurisdictions like Canada, where it is leapfrogged to the second reason for cause of death. And in the scope of these policies has expanded there over time. And this is about concerns how vulnerable issues or access to care, and whether it just becomes an easier option when adequate treatment or support isn't available. So my question is, do you view medical aid in dying as a matter of personal liberty or as a potentially dangerous expansion in the role of government and the medical system in end-of-life decisions? And if you do support it in any capacity, what safeguards do you believe would be necessary to ensure vulnerable people are protected?
Well, the thing is that's a very good question, and like you said, it's a double-edged sword. It's going to benefit some people, but some people can get taken advantage of. You're seeing what's going on right now in California with all of these people who are supposed to be helping the homeless and are just pocketing the money. So you definitely have to have a tight bill with a lot of oversight, with people that have a lot of experience in those kind of issues. But I think that if you really feel like you've lost your motivation to live, and that's what you want, that might be something that I would be open to. It's your freedom of a life. If you feel you're suffering too much, you know what I'm saying?
So it seems you support a possibility of end-of-life services being decided or procured by the government or the medical establishment. Again, then what safeguards would be available? Because in Europe and in Canada, it's no longer just a 78-year-old who's in constant pain. We're having healthy young people who are, quote-unquote, depressed being referred to for suicide in their first doctor's visit.
I understand that. I hear that. And so we need somebody who's experienced in those things. You know what I'm saying? So that is not a level of, I don't have the level of expertise on that. I'm not going to try to, wing it on that, but so we would need to have a real people who have a lot of experience. But in some cases, like you talked about suicide, but what if you have cancer, or what if you're on dialysis all the time and it's just too much for you? What if you have some other kind of sickness where you're just like, what? It's just too hard to live. I think I'm better off just, it's going to happen eventually, for some people, I think it may be the proper answer.
Thank you.
Tim Ross for Nevada Veterans Association. Retail theft has increased our focus on organized retail theft and smash and grab incidents. They've changed the limits on this, and it's become a real crisis. Do you believe our current sentencing guidelines are effective deterrent, or do we need to revisit the felony thresholds established in recent years?
That is a fantastic question, and I that was one of the main issues that I ran on the last time. And some states, they have what it calls where they add up, where these violations add up. So if they catch you for petty crime and you steal $100 or $200, it adds up. And eventually when it becomes $1,200, it becomes a felony. I would like to lower the threshold back down to $650 and implement a law that if you're caught shoplifting, okay, they would augment, they would add them up. You know what I'm saying? And so once you reach that threshold of $650, then it becomes a felony. Okay. I would also, we definitely need to slow that down, because where I live at, we see smash and grabs happening all the time, especially with young teenagers coming in, doing that. And we want to slow that down, because you're giving them a ticket to steal up to $1,250. And like we talked earlier, a lot of these kids, it's a game. And now that's what they're starting a criminal career instead of focusing on education and the fundamentals, which is what our country is built on. We're getting back to the question about teaching our kids what our country was built on. Our country wasn't built on getting a free ride. Our country was built on, pulling your own weight.
I wanted to comment on what you said earlier about taking the kids on a field trip, showing them some of the routes that they have to success in life. That's a very good idea.
You like that?
It shows them that there's another way than just going the wrong way.
Right, exactly.
Frank Friends, Veterans of Politics, Family Court Observer. So Nevada has the death penalty. We haven't used it since the 70s, and we spent, I think, $8.6 million on a new death facility. we have people on camera doing the criming. You had a dude doing 120 down Cheyenne and Tenaya, killing people. You have another dude who's on camera shooting and killing somebody. You have the Home Depot shooting. You have the least discount liquor shooting where they shot and killed a pregnant woman. These are all 100% guilty people. Would you be opposed, or would you be okay with a bill that sends them directly to the front of the line so that taxpayers don't pay $1.6 million to keep these people yearly fed with better medical care than I get? How do you feel about the death penalty and putting an express lane for people that are on camera doing the crime?
That's a very good question. I'd have to look at other states, how they're handling the death penalty. But I can tell you that it's a possibility where that's an option that I would seriously consider. I've done a lot of research there's a lot of videos out there right now on YouTube about people who have been in law enforcement for many, many years. Okay, some of them even got arrested because they were over at the over in LA at one of the Rampart District. They had some of the people. I don't know if you know what's going on, what went on down there. The long story short is that a lot of these law enforcement people or people that got out of jails, they said that there's some people that definitely belong to be in jail. Need to be in jail. That's where they have to be. There's some people that can be fixed, or they can have, they can get the right therapy, they get the right training. But there are definitely some people who are menaces to society. And we really got to look closely at that. And so I would be open to looking at that law.
Well, my question is, if they're on camera shooting a pregnant woman, killing her and the baby, and it's 100% guilty, would you be okay with having an express lane sending them to the front as soon as the gavel hits?
You mean in that particular situation? I'd be open to something to that, depending on the person. If he's really sick in the head, especially if he's got a track record of committing these crazy crimes or has been evaluated mentally, I would definitely look at something closely like that. Yes.
All right. I want to revisit the question, because the question that Mr. Ross asked actually is very good and is tethered to my previous question. So you mentioned lowering the threshold back down because it was raised in AB4 and even in AB4 included, saying a smash and grab before person, does the robbery, the crime, the dollar amount of the crime didn't account for, like to say the case, to say they robbed a jewelry store and the case was broken, right. But the cost of that case that they broke didn't get accounted for in the cost threshold, only the jewelry that was stolen. So that was one of the mechanisms that was put into AB4.
That's correct.
There are many community leaders who see AB4 as racially motivated. It's built on racism. It only hurts Black and brown communities. Your thought process of lowering the threshold back to 650, what would be a fair response that meets people where they are based on that charge that would be racially motivated? Okay, I don't really understand. How is that? Can you rephrase that question? How does the racially motivated fit into supporting that crime? I don't understand. So, to a certain extent, that's part of the beginning could be part of the beginning of your response. Mm-hmm. So, if the law is the law, and if the person broke that law or transgressed that law, then could your response be? Well, I don't really think. Can you guys hear? Is the mic on? Yes. Okay. First of all, you really have to look at how many people that are white or, well, I don't want to say, because it's always a white and non-white issue, or you got to look at racially, how many people are committing that type of a crime. You can't say because. Like, for example, you got to look at how many people that are committing the same level of crime if they're getting prosecuted. For example, I'm minority. I'm Latino. Okay, I'm Latino. So anyway, if you look at a crime and a bunch, like right now, a lot of Latinos
I'm going to get in trouble for this. A lot of Latinos are going around doing donuts. You know what I'm saying? And so now let's say the Caucasian people's kids start doing donuts over in Henderson and they start getting arrested. They're going to say, well, you know what? There's a racial bias here. You know, why are they throwing the white kids in jail and why aren't they throwing the brown kids in jail? It has to do, you got to look at the statistics. You follow what I'm saying? You got to see for the same level of crime, how many people, if it's fairly being enforced. That's the answer. You know?
So being clear, because there are those who would argue that overall crime statistics are down and therefore there was no need for AB4 in the first place. But whether it's the statistics or not, again, dating myself, there once was a TV show where it said if you can't do the time, don't do the crime. So is it an issue for statistical data of the number of people of a certain demographic who are committing an offense, or just simply if you commit the offense, here's the penalty?
Yeah, exactly.
And then there are those who would argue that those who are not white, or receive more time disproportionately than those who are. So again,
that you have to look at the statistics and you have to talk to the judges, you know, because, you know, when you see law enforcement goes out there, because I've been there, you know, we've arrested some of these guys that are doing encampments, okay? And we've arrested them white, black, and Latino. There's everything out there, okay? But a lot of this, what the judges are the ones that make that decision. You know, we just set the laws and we set the guidelines and we expect the judges to enforce them equally, blindly. That's why you got the blind lady there with the Libra thing. I'm a Libra with the scale. Okay, so obviously that law is not being enforced the way it should be enforced at the judicial level.
You're up, boss.
You're out.
All right, Al. Thank you very much. So in 2025 session, we saw bills like AB 82, which have required the governor to formally recognize additional cultural observances for all these wider range of differently cultural diversity groups. And ultimately, these were vetoed by Joe Lombardo. But more broadly, it felt like the legislature continues to spend time expanding government into areas that many people don't see as our core priorities. And in a lot of cases, the only real check was that governor's veto. So my question is, what are 2 or 3 areas that you believe the Nevada state government is currently too involved in and should actually be stepping back right now? And how would we do that without implementing more laws?
One of the things that I'm gonna call out Chick Seegerbloom on this one. You know, we've worked together on some stuff. You know, I have to work with Democrats as a Republican doing the cleanups. I work with my commissioner Kirkpatrick. I have to work with Chick Seegerbloom, with Olivia Diaz, and Shelley Berkeley, because you know these are the people that help us enforce these laws. The thing is that when I see where government is spending too much money is on these services that are not working. Getting back to the veterans. Why do we have so many veterans out there that are homeless when we got all these services? Where is the transparency? Where is the figure of merit? How many veterans did we get off the street? Can anybody provide me that statistic? Why are veterans out homeless on the street? I've talked to them out there. I'm a veteran. You don't think that bothers me? So the thing is that's where they're spending too much money. I think one of the areas is that these services are not transparent enough. Okay? And I think we got to start getting these services to actually do their job, not just keep throwing money and raising taxes, which is what Tick wanted to do.
And finally, just to finish up, great with the transparency and accountability for social services, which is things that we've noticed in Minnesota and California have gotten out of control.
Right.
But also, what about these cultural topics that continue to come up and kind of take up a lot of time in legislature, whether you're talking about holidays or special crimes for penalties for crimes against a certain cultural group? how can we start to just concentrate on what's most important to all Nevadans?
That's exactly, you just said the key word. Concentrate on what's most important. Setting priorities. Law enforcement, when you call for law enforcement to come down, because I know I call 311 a lot for the neighborhood watch, they go on a priority level. They go, this is what's more important. If you're getting shot, if somebody got in a major accident, we have to go with the priority. Jobs, security, getting people, housing. These are the issues that we should be focusing on, not a lot of these things that you're talking about.
Thank you, Al, very much.
Frank Friends, veteran of politics and court observer. So the Second Amendment states that the government shall not infringe upon our right to carry and bear firearms. California and a few other states are doing magazine bans, doing this ban and that ban. They're doing brace bans for veterans who might need a brace to actually be able to use the firearm and to defend themselves because they think it's some kind of thing that makes the gun more lethal or deadly because it's, scary looking. Where do you stand on these infringements upon the Second Amendment, and what will you do to stop them?
Well, I'm a strong supporter of the Second Amendment. I do believe that people have the right to defend themselves. There's many, it's a complex issue. If you're out in the country and you need to defend yourself, or you're out hunting, I really would have to look at the issue. I do believe that in terms of what you're talking about, if it's proven, if there's enough evidence that people are getting accidentally killed, then maybe there should be a restriction. Like for some of these people that have most of these shootings are people with mental problems. Like if you have now proving that is another gray line. There's got to be transparency on there. But there's for every rule there's an exception. And there has to be strong evidence that is something that warrants people not having a weapon. You follow what I'm saying?
Well, I'm not necessarily talking about them not having a weapon. I'm talking about you saying what they can put on their weapon: an extra magazine extension, a specialized stabilizing brace because they happen to have a disability in their forearm, and it allows them to hold the weapon correctly and safely. California and the ATF are trying to ban these things or make laws to where they can be banned when they don't affect the safety of the firearm. They don't affect anything that the firearm does. It just makes it easier for the user to defend their own life.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's the case. If there's no proof that it affects the use of the weapon or that it causes accidents, then I would not support that kind of legislation to block a person who feels that they need a weapon to protect their safety.
All right. This concludes the end. This is the end of our interview portion of today's event. I'd like to give you a moment, 1 minute, to just give some closing remarks.
Okay. Well, one of the things, like I said, education and public safety are the foundation of prosperity. I haven't met one person yet, either Democrat, Republican, or nonpartisan, who doesn't believe that. One of the laws that I really want to see that's very high on my priority list is what I call the HALO law. And that means that law enforcement officers should have a 15-foot buffer when people are out there observing what they're doing. So they'd have to have a body cam on and say, hey, you have to get 15 feet back. Because, I'm seeing a lot of our law enforcement officers getting attacked over on Fremont Street, where they're doing their job and somebody is like hitting them or kicking them. That is ridiculous. So we need to protect our law. We don't have enough officers right now. When you call for services, 311 is still taking too long. So we definitely need to protect our law enforcement officers.
All right, that concludes today's interviews. Once again, I'd like to recognize and thank all of our sponsors: Mary Perry, Clark County District Court Family Division, Department P, Veterans in Politics International, Nevada Veterans Association, and our additional sponsoring partners for the leadership, support, and dedication to the veterans and to the integrity of our non-judicial process. Thank you.
Thank you.
Join us every Wednesday night at 6 p.m. Pacific Time, live stream on Facebook.